Alright, so our next unit is all about conic sections, which you started learning in Math 2 with parabolas. Parabolas are a certain type of conic section. And then you also learned in Math 3 about circles and more parabolas. And so what we're going to do today is just kind of review circles. Tomorrow we'll review parabolas, and then we'll go into the other two that you haven't learned yet. So to start off, we have what is a circle in standard form. So if you remember from last year, circles in standard form are x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And the parts that we need to know are that h and k are the center of your circle, and r is the radius. So we're going to start by just writing some equations in standard form. So the first two that we have here, the center is at the origin, so we have to remember that the ordered pair for the origin is 0, 0, and our radius is 9. So if we think x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals r squared. Now, because we're subtracting 0, we can just write that as x squared plus y squared, and then 9 squared is 81. And there would be your equation in standard form. When you have something like number 2, where we have an ordered pair for our center, but our radius isn't a nice whole number. So how do we go about that? So again, we start x minus h squared plus y minus k squared, and yes, you'll have a double negative, and we'll simplify that away later, equals 3 square root 2 squared. So for this one, we don't have anything to simplify with our x minus 3, so we can just copy that down. For y, we're going to make that a y plus 4, so we can change that double negative to a positive. And then lastly, 3 root 2 squared, that's 9 times 2, or 18. And this would be your standard form equation. So hopefully that kind of brings back a little bit of how you write an equation in standard form, especially when you're given the key pieces of center and radius. But we're not always given our equations to us in this nice standard form. Sometimes we are given our equations all jumbled up. And so we have to convert it to standard form. And this is where, in the last unit, the completing the square, this is why I wanted you to have practice, because that's how we're going to turn this into standard form when it's all jumbled up together. So some of the key things that you want to know about your circle in standard form is that there should not be fractions or coefficients in front of your x and your y. So when we have those, we have to divide them out or divide them away, because they need to be on the radius side, not on the center side. So in looking at this first one, for writing the equation in standard form, and then identify or find the center and the radius, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything by 3. That way I get rid of the fraction. So I have 16x squared plus 16y squared equals 3. Then I'm going to divide everything by 16 because I can't have coefficients in front of my x and y squared. So we have x squared plus y squared equals 3 over 16. That's our standard form. So standard form has x squared and y squared on one side. There should be no fraction coefficients. There should be no coefficients whatsoever. So all of those are moved to the other side. When that happens, you have your standard form. So our center, we look at what's the number being added or subtracted inside parentheses with x and y. Well, there's nothing. So we would have 0, 0. Our radius is going to be the square root of 3 over 16. Because remember, that's r squared, so we have to square root it to get the radius. So r would be the square root of 3 over 4 when we simplify that radical. So these would be your two pieces of information needed for when we graph these, because we're going to do a graphing one in class. Okay, so right now we're just going over how to convert into that standard form and pull out the information we need so that we can put it on a graph. Number 2, this is one where we do have to do some completing the square. So you should notice that all the x's and y's are all mixed together. So the first thing we're going to do is group the x's together and group the y's together. So separate them all out. So we'll have 9x squared. That has to go with the 54x. And no, I'm not going to do that yet. Parentheses. Plus, and then I'm going to group the 9y squared minus the 36y. And I'm going to move over my constant, so minus 17. So what we're going to have to do next is complete the square with x and complete the square with y. So we're doing it twice. So if we're remembering how we complete the square, if we have a number out front, we have to factor that out. And then we're going to add something in parentheses to complete the square. Same thing here, I have to factor out that 9. And then I'm going to add something in parentheses. And on my other side, I'm going to put 2 blanks so that I remember I'm adding 2 things to the left, so I have to add 2 things to the right. So find this number, that's our b divided by 2 squared. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. And because there's a 9 on the outside, to the opposite side, we're going to actually add 81. Multiply 9 times the 9 out front. For the second one, negative 4 divided by 2 is 2, or negative 2. And negative 2 squared is 4. 4 times 9 is 36. So that's what we're going to add to the other side. Next, we're going to factor. So we'll have x plus 3 squared and y minus 2 squared equals, and when we add all of these together, I believe we get 100. So we're almost there. We've got our x squared, x plus or minus something, and our y plus or minus something, both squared. But we can't have these coefficients of 9. So that means we have to divide everything by 9 to get rid of those coefficients. And so here would be our equation in standard form. So again, fractions are okay on the radius side. We just can't have any fractions or coefficients in front of our parentheses squared. Otherwise, it's not considered standard form. So lastly, we have to identify our center. So again, we're going to do the opposite. So negative 3, positive 2. There's the center of our circle. And our radius is going to be the square root of 100 over 9, because remember again, that's r squared, which would be 10 over 3. So we're going to do one more in class tomorrow. We're going to do one that's like the first two, where we're going to be given the center, except that this time we're going to do it when we're given center and diameter to see how it changes a little bit. And then we'll do another one here where we have to change it, and it's going to look more like number 2, where we have to convert it using completing the square into standard form. But then we're also going to put it on a graph, just to review how we graph these. So if you have any questions about circles, please bring them. Hopefully this was all review and nothing was new. But bring your questions and we'll do those last 2 examples in class before you guys have time to work.